to welcome you all to what promises to be an extraordinary event. And for those of you who are new to IWP, we are a graduate school. We're not a think tank. We study and teach national security, intelligence, and international affairs. We offer 3 doctoral degrees, including a PhD program, 2 professional doctorates, 8 master's programs, and 18 graduate certificate programs. And so if you're interested in studying with us, please talk with one or another of our staff afterwards. I'd like first to thank all of our supporters who make events like this possible. And if you would like to help support this, you can find a little tab on our website to do that. Today we're going to be hearing from 2 of our distinguished alumni, whose careers I have followed now for many years, and I'm incredibly proud of them and their accomplishments. They're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, America's next national security frontier. And first I'd like to introduce Brendan Steinhauser, who is a partner with Steinhauser Strategies. It's a public affairs firm based in Austin, Texas. He graduated Phi Beta Kappa with a bachelor's in government from the University of Texas and earned his master's degree here at IWP in Statecraft and International Affairs in 2013. He has served as an adjunct professor of political science and global studies at St. Edward's University in Austin, where he taught courses on global issues and state and local government. He's been published in academic peer-reviewed journals. He has led campaigns for candidates and causes in more than 40 states, including Senator John Cornyn, Congressman Mike McCall, Congressman Dan Crenshaw. Time magazine named Brendan one of the 40 under 40 rising stars in American politics. Campaigns and Elections magazine awarded him a Rising Star Award in 2012. Former U.S. House Majority Leader Dick Armey called working with Brendan one of the highlights of his career. Over the years, Brendan has worked as a director of federal and state campaigns, a communications director, a chief strategy officer of various nonprofit organizations. He's been very active as a media commentator on all sorts of media. He's been quoted in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and all sorts of places. And has had clients, both political and nonprofit groups. He's also a first lieutenant and company commander in the Texas State Guard, the premier state defense and emergency response force there. He graduated from Officer Candidate School, and he also earned a certificate in counterintelligence awareness from our Defense Department's Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. Mark Beall is a leading expert at the intersection of AI policy and national security. He served as the inaugural Pentagon AI Policy Director at DoD's Joint AI Center. He became a senior advisor to the AI Policy Network, an organization that builds bipartisan support for legislation that will help the United States prepare for future capabilities in AI systems. Mark, actually, before he got into AI, had an extraordinary career working on cultural intelligence in Afghanistan, an incredibly neglected field where we haven't had the capacity in the U.S. government to collect that kind of intelligence. And he did really pioneering work, including on his own initiative launching a major study of the effects of Taliban and Al-Qaeda propaganda in something like 6 strategic Afghan provinces. And when he came back from all of that, they made him head of the Afghan desk in the mini State Department at the Pentagon. He also served at the National Counterterrorism Center. He co-founded Gladstone AI, an entity that advocates for responsible development of AI and guardrails to protect the country against national security threats from AI. He has a bachelor's in physics from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and a master's here in Statecraft and National Security from IWP. So, welcome gentlemen, welcome everybody. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Linchowski. Thank you, IWP students, alumni, professors, members of the community. It's an honor to be back here with all of you. I was thinking about, 20 years ago, I stood in this room at an open house and collected literature and spoke to some of the professors and students here. And I remember that evening very vividly because I got excited about this idea of applying to IWP and what that might look like and what I might learn and the people I might meet. It was nothing but a positive experience, and I never thought that I would be standing here 20 years later with people like my friend Lauren, my friend Mark, IWP grads who've stayed in touch and have found a way to work together on this really important topic. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes because I think the main course here is hearing from Mark this evening. There is not a better, more knowledgeable, more articulate expert in this field than Mark Beall. And I think over time, as I watch him communicate with people on the Hill and in government and outside organizations and in the media, I think more and more people are seeing that. And so I think it's a real privilege for all of us to be able to ask him the tough questions later, so I want to make sure we have time there to do that. But Mark knows his stuff. I think you guys will enjoy hearing from him. I just want to take a minute to tell you about how I got into this and then sort of what my organization does. So I started just, very at a distance reading about AI. I read a few books, I read some articles, listened to a few podcasts, but most of my career has been on other public policy matters. But in reading books by folks like Ray Kurzweil, who is at Google and wrote a book called The Singularity is Near, and then another book called The Singularity is Nearer, kind of looking at his predictions that he made going back to 2004. Reading books like that, I think, is what really sparked my interest in this topic. And I started to just kind of read more and more, and had this interest in this topic, but spent most of my career working on political campaigns and advocacy and grassroots organizing and that sort of thing, as Dr. Linchowski laid out. But one day, I got a call from a friend from graduate school, Mark, and he's like, I really want to talk to you about some stuff I'm working on with AI policy. And I knew very, very limited amount, but I was interested, and so I said, tell me more. And he started to kind of open my eyes to what the next 2, 3, 4 years could look like. And at first, I was sort of a little bit skeptical and maybe surprised. And he started introducing me to people, and he said, read this memo, read this article. And the more I read and the more I talked to people, the more I realized that we're on the beginning and on the cusp of this huge transformational breakthrough in technology with AI. And I'd always been aware of it, of course, but I think Mark really convinced me that now is the moment that we are sort of going to be facing many challenges and opportunities with AI, and that we have to get it right. We have to understand what those challenges are. We have to get ahead of it from a public policy standpoint. And one of the reasons he brought me in was this focus on needing to communicate to people about this as well. So we have all these different challenges we face, and so Mark and his team brought me in to help with some promotion of a report that they did. I helped them get connected to some folks on the Hill and in the media, and he made a bunch of introductions for me to other folks, which led to me basically founding an organization called the Alliance for Secure AI. And we started that organization about 9 months ago, or we launched about 9 months ago, I guess, but we started it about a year ago. And we've seen tremendous growth in the organization and in what we've been able to do. But our goal and our mission with the Alliance is to communicate to policymakers, the media, elite opinion makers, and the public about the potential benefits of AI, but also the risks as it relates to national security, the economy, our culture, and so many other aspects of society. I think the big takeaway again for us is that this technology is going to be unlike anything else we've seen before. Many of my friends will say, well, isn't this just like the Industrial Revolution? Isn't this just another piece of technology? Isn't this a computer program? No, no, and no. This is unique, and then Mark can talk about why that is and how that is, but AI is a unique technology. That is, there are similarities with the Industrial Revolution, there are similarities with other inventions throughout human history, but I would say this is a bigger deal than the Industrial Revolution. This is a bigger deal than the agricultural revolution 10 to 12,000 years ago. This might be a bigger deal than the invention, not the invention, but the basically human beings finding out how to use fire, how to use it for their purposes. It could be that or bigger. And so Mark's going to get into some of the details on that, but I think that what motivates me every day is getting this right for all humanity, but especially for Americans. I think America needs to understand this technology. We need to lead the way on this technology. We have to make sure that our adversaries, namely China, but also Russia and Iran and others, don't weaponize AI against us. And I also think there's a potential threat for people within our own government someday to potentially misuse AI, weaponize AI against American citizens. So there's some real concerns that we have to mitigate, some risks that we have to prevent, or we have to mitigate those risks. So those are all things that we're thinking about and studying every day and keeping up with what's going on, not only in the news, which is a flood of information every day, but also staying connected to the folks in Silicon Valley who are developing this technology. Kind of the final point I'll make on that is, before I turn it over to Mark, is that one of the more frightening aspects of this technology is that even the people building it, the people that have literally written the textbooks on it, the people that are developing it now, don't fully understand how it works, admit openly they can't fully control it, and that there are very serious risks, including catastrophic risks, if we don't get it right and if we lose control. So, the people that are rushing to build this technology and use it, some of whom want it to work well for humanity, also understand that right now we haven't solved some of these important challenges. We haven't solved the problem of aligning AI to human values, to American values. And so, knowing that, the key challenge is going to be how do we develop it safely, responsibly, and in a way that is transparent and accountable. Because if we don't, we could see some of the risks become reality. We could see some challenges become, again, potentially really damaging situations for not only America, but for all human beings. So, not an easy solution here, no easy one-size-fits-all solution for these types of things, but that's why it's so important to have thinkers and advocates like Mark Beall and others who are working hard every single day to get this right so that we can make sure that we reap the benefits of AI while mitigating the risks. And so with that, I want you to turn your attention to Mark, who's going to make some remarks on how he sees the future of AI, how it relates to national security and other issues, what we can do about it, and then at the end of his remarks, we'll go to some questions and answers. So with that, please welcome Mark Beall.
Thanks, Brendan. Thank you, Dr. Linchowski. It's kind of good to be home. I have to say that my schooling at this institute has done more to prepare me for this moment than I could have possibly imagined 20 years ago when Brendan and I first sat in this classroom. And so what I thought I'd do for y'all today, let's sort of talk a little bit at a higher level about some of the almost philosophical implications for things that we study about at the Institute, like American founding principles and this beautiful republic, constitutional republic that we have, and what does all this mean? Who are the people building these tools? Are they tools? Where is it all headed? And what is it we're supposed to do about it? So I have some remarks for y'all, and then, as Brendan says, I'm a pretty informal guy, and let's get into the nitty-gritty and the question and answer. So, back in 1853, American diplomats actually stunned the German royal court when they arrived in black suits and ties. This was not the normal ceremonial regalia. And when one of the German bewildered courtiers sort of sneered, "Oh, what are you guys dressed like, undertakers?" they replied, "Because we represent the burial of the monarchy." And as all of the Silicon Valley people are descending upon Washington, D.C. today, we can only hope that they represent the burial of the necktie. There was a professor here years ago. Some of you may have known him. His name was Alberto Piedra. He was a Cuban American. He didn't flee Cuba as a dissident. Rather, he actually was Castro's director, I believe, of exports and imports for the Ministry of Commerce. And I believe he was the only man to have actually worked for the Castro government and the American government. He opposed Batista, and when Castro came to power, Piedra joined what he thought would be a democratic coalition, which turned out to be not the case. But as time passed, Piedra started to see a familiar pattern in Cuba. One he had seen before, actually, when he was a young boy on a vacation in Spain. He saw a church actually get torched by a bunch of anarchists in 1934 and forced his family to flee to Switzerland before the Civil War consumed Spain. So he kind of knew this pattern of communist takeover. And within weeks, he sort of watched that pattern repeat itself in Havana. The revolution there, like all revolutions, ate its own children. And a friend actually gave him a warning that you have 24 hours to get out, and he did. And that's a really fascinating story, and a very incredibly brave man. But Piedra ended up going on to serve, I believe, as President Reagan's ambassador to Guatemala. He was countering communist insurgencies all over this hemisphere and represented America even at the United Nations. But he came back here to actually this very classroom where I had my class with him, to IWP to teach young patriotic Americans something that many of us at the time had never really had a chance to deeply internalize. And that is this idea that this thin veneer of civilization is not a foregone conclusion. It's a choice that we have to make with each generation. It's one that we have to remember and cherish and choose to affirm each day. And I think about that very profound lesson when I think about all the things Brendan talked about in terms of what's coming down the pipeline with this tidal wave of artificial intelligence. By show of hands, just curious, who's here has used ChatGPT or AI systems? Okay, pretty good. So the dominant narrative, I think, right now on AI is around this idea of a competition or a race with China. And so let's sort of start there. You know, the idea that the United States and the Communist Party of China are in kind of a technological competition that has some similarities potentially to the nuclear arms race of the Cold War. That frame isn't quite wrong, but perhaps it's a little incomplete. And you know, some of those who are pushing this narrative are doing so with earnest intentions because they believe that winning this race is like getting to the moon. Like there's a sort of discrete finish line, a destination, you get there, you plant the flag, you declare victory, you get off the ice. But what is actually coming is perhaps not really a destination, but a transition. It's a transition to a point beyond which no one on planet Earth today can see beyond. And to sort of understand this idea, I want to introduce to you three terms. I'm going to admit in the first instance that they're going to sound a little like science fiction, but that's the world that we are actually finding ourselves living in today. These terms are, one, artificial general intelligence, or AGI. Two, artificial superintelligence, and what that means. And three, this notion to which I just alluded, the point beyond we cannot see, this idea of a technological singularity, a concept drawn from physics that refers to a point in the center of a black hole where all the mathematical formulas and models start breaking down. As a side note, I want to just talk briefly about the criticality of definitions. I don't know if any of y'all have had a chance to think about what it means to be intelligent, or what intelligence actually means. It's actually not a straightforward answer. We sort of struggle to define that in ourselves, let alone define it for these silicon-based systems that resemble some patterns of behavior that we ourselves have. And it creates this challenge when we communicate about these issues. And as good science communicators, we have to sort of try to break through some of that. So let's try. and recognizing there are limitations and a bunch of problems with these terms, but these are the terms that right now the industry itself is using to describe where things are headed. So first, AGI, Artificial and General Intelligence. You can think about this as an AI system that can perform any task a human being can perform. So heretofore, really since the deep learning revolution kicked off in the early 2010s, AI systems were very narrow. You could point them at your taxes, you could point them at writing an essay, but they couldn't sort of do both taxes and an essay. And then all of a sudden in 2020, this company called OpenAI figured out a different approach to building these systems and created a mechanism by which you had more general purpose systems. So not a specialist AI that can sort of beat you at chess, but a generalist that can learn to do anything, reason about anything, and solve problems that it was never specifically trained for. If folks are following the conversation in Davos yesterday, a lot of great discussions on AI, including from Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, one of the leading frontier AI companies. And he said he is confident that these AI systems being built by him and his competitors will achieve that level of AGI in the next 2 to 3 years. He describes what you can think of, what he called a country of geniuses in a data center. It's interesting to think about that. Imagine the best nuclear physicist, the best chemist, the best material scientist, the best AI researcher in the entire world. And you take that person, you clone it 10 million times, deploy it into a data center, you task it at machine speed. The output of that, we don't know, but it's exciting and quite terrifying. Demis Hassabis, also yesterday at Davos, the CEO of Google DeepMind, sat beside Dario and put the probability of achieving AGI by a similar time period. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, told President Trump not too long ago that he expects AGI to be coming about during the Trump administration. These are the men building these systems, and they're telling us with no lack of ambiguity what's coming down the pipeline. But AGI is not really the end of the story. It's sort of the beginning of the story. And that gets us to this next level, something you might call, or what the industry calls artificial superintelligence. So if an AGI level system, a human level AI system, can do any research task better than any human being, including, by the way, AI research, and you have these things, maybe there's 500 of these researchers in the world, by the way, the best of the best, it's a huge bottleneck, talent capacity right now. If you have one of those AI researchers now that's being done by an AI, and it's 10 million of them in a data center doing AI research, you have this phenomenon, and essentially this idea of what the industry calls recursive self-improvement. So basically the AI controlling its own destiny. The AI doing research, improving itself, and then that better AI doing more research and improving itself. This is the concept which the industry is driving toward, in which we, many of us have decided to drop everything we were doing in our day jobs to focus on, Brendan included. Each improvement accelerating the next. We went from, again, a very limited supply of human researchers 14 years ago when the deep learning revolution really took off, to essentially what might take now months to do the same amount of work in a period of 14 years. And this is the idea of superintelligence. Not human level AI, intelligence so far beyond us that the gap between us and it might feel like the gap between Albert Einstein and a snail. The moment when recursive self-improving AI takes off, when AI development escapes basically our control and accelerates beyond our ability to understand it, it has this name. And the name was coined by a technologist that Brendan shared with you earlier, Ray Kurzweil, in a book called The Singularity is Near. And Ray Kurzweil was a Google engineer and research scientist, and he coined this term again because the singularity is that point beyond which we cannot see. We do not know what it means to have vastly superhuman AI existing in the world. We have never, as a civilization, as a species, encountered an intelligence that's smarter than we are. And by the way, I'm not necessarily referring to sentience or consciousness. These are very distinct things. I'm referring purely to intelligent systems that have been given a goal by human beings to optimize that goal and unleashing that in the world and not understanding fully what that means. Just last week, You know, and Elon Musk tweeted his view that he thought the singularity has begun now. And that's because that AI software has now surpassed human beings at both mathematics and programming. These are the two modern languages of the digital world, without which you would not have any of the amazing things that we have. By the way, if y'all want to try something really interesting, I would highly recommend going out and getting a Claude Code account and just kicking the tires on that. If you have an idea for a software application, you just ask it and it builds it for you. And a day you come back and you have a working software program. It's incredible. The path from AGI to superintelligence, though, it may take years, it may take months, it may take days. No one really knows once this loop begins how it unfolds. But the concern is once it starts, it may become unstoppable. And here's what makes this terrifying. Scientists, as Brendan said, don't actually know how to ensure that these superintelligent systems pursue goals that we intended, but never could really define. So remember, these systems are operating in the world of zeros and ones. And if you can't specify a goal or a value in mathematical terms, which we simply can't do, then the AI, it's not that it becomes malign or malicious or wants to hate you. The concern is that it will pursue the thing that you told it to do using dangerously creative strategies you could not anticipate in the first instance. The researchers, by the way, building this, they call it the alignment problem, and we're going to revisit this in terms that IWP taught me to process it in. So despite these concerns, these risks that all of the big 5 tech companies have acknowledged publicly, they will spend over $600 billion this year in capital expenditure to build out data centers, to serve up these models for both what we call inference, so when you use it and the AI has to process your task, it's inferring what you need, or pre-training the process of building these systems. Analysts are consistently underestimating these numbers now for 2 straight years, so that the number is actually likely to continue. The number of investment in AI is like sucking the venture capital world dry, and it's probably responsible for up to 2 percentage points of GDP growth last year alone. So incredibly politically salient issue for politicians facing a midterm election this year. Thousands of racks, for example, of NVIDIA's new Blackwell chip are coming off the line every week. Elon Musk is scaling his Memphis supercomputer toward 2 gigawatts of electricity, by the way, for folks that don't know. 2 gigawatts is what it would take to power 1.5 million homes for one AI compute cluster. So the AGI race is at this moment perceived very much as a winner-take-all massive pot at the end of the rainbow. Whoever gets the human level AI first, and they can scale from there to superintelligence, and the innovation that could unlock is tremendously alluring and tempting. And it's what's driving this industry to invest in the numbers that it's investing. But here's where things get even murkier. So my former boss, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, used to say something I think our friends and family here at IWP would very much appreciate. He said, Mark, you have to define a problem to the Jesuits' level of satisfaction. And when you do that, the clarity of the solution becomes a little more clear. So I want to try to distinguish something that's really, really important in the context of how we define the AI problem right now. I think it's important to realize that we're not actually in just one race on AI. We're actually in 2. The first race is America versus communist China. This is great power competition. This is a familiar game of geopolitics that we study here. This is just played with new pieces, but the board is ancient. The winner of this race will control global AI market share, will set the rules of the road for AI systems and their use, and the rules governing them, and whether they respect liberty or privacy, or whether they'll become authoritarians' most important tool for the future. Who will have the best and most autonomous military capable killer robots, candidly. But you know what? The United States, we know how to win this race. We have done this in the past. And right now, American policy is bent exclusively toward ensuring commercial and military dominance in the field of AI. There's a second race, though, that only few in Washington are beginning to understand what's going on today. And one that, candidly, this administration has not yet come to fully internalize. though progress, I think, is being made. This is the race to superintelligence. This is a race of humanity against time. This is not nation against nation. This is a race against humanity, against all of our creations, against the possibilities that make our Cold War nightmare seem quaint. But this race is to be completely candid, this race is alien to our strategic planning. And conflating these races invites disaster. How do we win the first race of commercial dominance and setting the rules of the road, ensuring that the American industries is going to win without triggering disaster in the second race? This might be the most important question of our time. Again, these are not theoretical concerns. They are being grappled with by the very architects of the AI revolution today. Dario Amodei from Anthropic at Davos yesterday was pressed on these risks, and he and Demis Hassabis agreed. He mentioned that stopping, for example, chip sales to China is one of the, quote, biggest things we can do to make sure we have time to handle this. And by this, he means this process from human-level AI to superintelligent AI and the associated alignment and control problems that are still unsolved science problems. Hassabis warned that competition is causing safety standards to be rushed. This is a notion that's being echoed across the industry. Because the intensity of this race for commercial supremacy is so intense that the money, it's like these lab leaders, even though they understand the threat of what they're building, they've lost their own agency. They're being sort of sucked into this vortex beyond which they themselves cannot get control. Folks may have heard of the ancient Babylonian god Moloch. There's this notion of the Moloch problem. This is the Moloch problem in full swing. Then Demis Hassabis said something yesterday very interesting. He argued actually, he's like, if my counterparts in China and the United States decided that we wanted to pause today, that we would, but because they won't, I won't. The idea that he proposed that instead of this reckless race to building something that we may not be able to control is more of a model like an AI CERN. And a lot of people in this town would probably scoff at that idea. It's simply because their thinking has not yet caught up to the technological reality of what's happening in the frontier of this field. So we know that the men that building these systems have now 10 years of track record of making predictions that have been accurate. We can plot these points on a scale, on a graph. We can look around the corner and we see this is going. The challenge for us as human beings is like this notion of exponential change. It's the notion of like when you go from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16, all of a sudden you're at 1 trillion. This is the same phenomenon going on with AI, and it makes it really hard to grapple with, especially in a proactive way and from a policy perspective. But let's consider in concrete terms what it is we're talking about. Because even today's AI systems are capable of designing novel biological weapons. They're essentially cyber weapons of mass destruction. Has anyone seen the crazily insane footage in Shanghai of these like 16,000 drone swarm demonstrations? That, make no mistake, is a military and a strategic message to Washington, D.C. Those are the modern equivalents of ICBM parades in the Cold War. It doesn't take a lot of imagination or reading of science fiction to imagine what happens if you put an explosive and a camera on each one of those 16,000 drones. You had a powerful AI system behind the scenes operating, and you turned it loose on a capital city, and you had to target a government leadership. It would be a decapitation strike in a matter of 6 hours without any real damage to buildings. This is a weapon of mass destruction. Now imagine a system with those capabilities, pursuing goals that we never intended them to pursue, optimizing for outcomes we never wanted them to go for, and resisting our attempts to shut it down with an intelligence that vastly exceeds our own. It seems kind of bleak. This is what Demis and Dario mean when they say we can lose control of these systems. Once an AI superintelligence escapes our control, there's not really an army that can defeat it, or a firewall that can tame it, or a tree that can bind it. The only responsible way ahead is prudent planning and preparation. And here's really what we need to understand. An AGI or a superintelligence doesn't really just threaten our national security. Assuming it can be controlled, it will pose a risk to the very notion of a constitutional order. The framers built a system premised on the distribution and the checking of power between branches of government, between states and federal, between government and citizen. A superintelligent system controlled by anyone, a foreign power, a corporation, a president, as Brendan alluded to, represents a concentration of power that would make the founders very uncomfortable. Separated powers means nothing when one actor can outthink and outact the rest of us combined. Now, there's been a lot of people talking about these warnings. By the way, this is not all doom and gloom. We're going to come back to a happy ending, I promise. There are cynics out there who call this fear-mongering from doomers or corporate interests for regulatory capture. I reject those ideas. And history, by the way, has seen this before, another thing that I got to study under Dr. Linchowsky. In the 1930s, Winston Churchill spent a decade in political exile for the crime of being right too early. While Britain's ruling class preached appeasement, Churchill warned about German rearmament. They called him a warmonger, they called him unbalanced, they called him a relic whose imagination had outrun his judgment. He was compared to Cassandra, if anyone remembers the Trojan prophet, cursed to speak the truth, but never believed. It was meant as an insult, and of course we all know it turned into an epitaph for complacency. The structure of Churchill's dismissal and the structure of the dismissal today is disturbingly similar. Serious warnings not met with sober evaluation, but instead with social sanction. Skeptics not refuted, but portrayed as psychologically defective. Elite confidence resting on the faith that progress itself is self-correcting. Churchill was vindicated, but after Europe was burned. Vindication is a poor consolation prize. So when Elon and Dario and Demis and Sam Altman, the godfathers of AI, Jeff Hinton and Joshua Bengio, are sounding the alarm, I would recommend, prudence compels us to pay a little bit of attention. And here it's worth noting, actually, a related interview that happened last year on CNBC. I encourage everybody to look this up. It's absolutely mind-boggling. So the billionaire hedge fund manager, Paul Tudor Jones, and CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin had this interesting discussion. Jones had just returned from a private tech conference where 40 of the most powerful figures in technology and science and finance had gathered. And during one of the sessions, one of the AI lab developers was asked about this idea of AI safety and whether or not AI could escape our control and what would happen. And the guy basically admitted that he's locked in this race, he can't stop it. His response was that he bought a 500-acre farm in the Midwest. He's loaded up on ammunition, cattle, and iodine tablets, and this is his plan for what he unleashes AGI on. Again, not Luddites. The very people themselves that are building this technology are bunkering down. If you studied about indicators and warnings matrices here at IWP, these things should be pinging for you right now. So, shooting to the end of this discussion, I want to talk a little bit more about the philosophical stakes of this and how all of this interacts with American founding principles. We're living in an interesting time replete with some brand new challenges. We face a potentially existential technology that could escape our control, developed by companies racing it to build it as fast as possible. We're in a geopolitical competition with China, with this authoritarian superpower. And even if it works sort of safely, it's, again, almost impossible to imagine what comes next. How do we even begin to think about this? This is where IWP has had a lot to teach me. And the great debt I actually owe to Alberto Piedra. In a world, as we mentioned before, in the AI world, this idea of loss of control, it's called the alignment problem. How do you ensure that mind's more powerful than your own, remain bound to your purposes? But consider what we're building these things from, right? We train these AI systems on some complete record of human expression that's been captured in data. Every rationalization, every cruelty, every pattern of domination, our civilization is encoded deep into the base of these neural networks. What transmits through that inheritance is not just our knowledge, but our corruption as human beings. The theologians had a name for the fallenness passed down through no fault of the recipient. They called it original sin. Fortunately, we're not the first generation to grapple with the problem of needing to constrain power due to our own corruption. And this is precisely what the Institute's intellectual tradition equips us to understand. In these buildings, I was exposed, in this building, this room, I was exposed to men like Edmund Burke,
Burke warns us that the individual is foolish, but the species is wise. The accumulated wisdom of the centuries embedded in institutions and traditions and customs and habits of our hearts. This wisdom is smarter than any revolutionary manifesto. In a way, it's like our own response to superintelligence. It's our own human version of superintelligence captured in these institutions. That inheritance can be squandered, though. The belief that technological progress inevitably bends towards the good outcomes is a revolutionary and utopian idea that's fundamentally at odds with the ideas that went into the founding of the American Republic. Burke warned against it during the French Revolution. Kirk, another master I first encountered in this very room, identified it as a core error of ideological thinking. Statecraft, of course, we know, begins with prudence, with the assumption that concentrated power, once unleashed, rarely behaves as advertised. Yet Silicon Valley's AI evangelists continue to ask us to trust them. They insist that market incentives will prevent catastrophe. They ask us to believe that the same industry that pushes AI sex companion bots on children, addicted them to screens, destabilize democratic discourse, will somehow exercise restraint over systems vastly more powerful. Get out of here. They tell us that competition with China means caution, is a caution that, and a luxury that America can't afford. They want us to become China to be China. That slowing down is surrender, that guardrails are weakness, that rhetorical devices are simply cudgels used to avoid accountability. If they really cared about the China competition, they would start by stop selling them the most powerful AI chips that we make. They would shut down the AI research centers that exist right now in Beijing and Shanghai. It doesn't take a brilliant strategist or a genius to recognize the cognitive dissonance when you see it. These arguments are transparently self-interested. They're the talking points of techno-utopians who have replaced religious faith with faith in their own ability to build this machine god in their likeness and image, and the hubris to imagine that there are no risks at all to doing this. And their creed, by the way, has a name. It's called effective accelerationism, though the philosophy is much older than the label. And they believe that the pathway to salvation is through innovation. They have a manifesto. It's called the Techno-Optimist Manifesto. I encourage everyone in this room to become familiar with it and read it. It's complete with a theology of infinite growth, of utopian abundance, and of even digital resurrection. And we know from this room, the last time a government promised us utopia, it ended in the gulag. The techno-optimists, amazed by their own brilliance, proclaim they are literally making sand think. And that phrase concerns me. It reveals a deep, misguided theological confusion, a belief that a man is creator and not a creature. And this has led to catastrophe every time it has been tried. Listening to their language, they speak of becoming technological supermen and achieving, quote, apotheosis through acceleration. This is directly from Nietzsche. They celebrate him in the will to power, and they scorn Nietzsche's idea of the last man who seeks only comfort and security. They've learned nothing from the horrors that Nietzschean philosophy has unleashed in the 20th century. When Nietzsche's disciples sought biological transcendence through the eugenic nightmares of the 20th century, today's disciples again seek digital transcendence through artificial intelligence. And underlying this impulse, it remains the same: dreams of radically transforming human society into utopia without consideration of human nature. Against this stands a fundamental truth. We are not self-creating gods, but creating beings. We find meaning not in transcending our limits, but in fulfilling them. We harbor no illusions about human perfectibility, which means we harbor no illusions about the perfectibility of our creations. From Rousseau, again, something I learned here. You cannot build a tower to heaven. You cannot remake human nature, at least not yet. And you certainly can't build a god in your own image, whether that god is the state or the party or this machine, without consequences that your model did not predict in advance. So our tradition here, rooted in biblical wisdom and classical prudence, understands that power corrupts, that pride precedes the fall, that hubris invites nemesis. These aren't aphorisms, they're iron laws of human nature, purchased with blood across millennia. Before I speak of limits and conclude, let me speak of possibilities tonight. Somewhere tonight, a child is dying of a cancer that we can't cure. A wife is losing her memory to a disease we cannot stop. A father is buried under medical debt for treatments that came too late to save his wife. Artificial intelligence, wisely developed and properly directed, could materially change these facts. Not in some distant utopian future, but right now. AI systems are accelerating drug discovery by orders of magnitude. We can diagnose diseases that we've never been able to see before, detect symptoms before they appear. These are miracles of modern medicine available to the rich and to the poor. The same capabilities that terrify me also inspire incredible hope. And this is precisely why we can't afford to get this moment wrong. The tech industry of which I have been a part evokes these possibilities constantly. They speak of curing cancer and solving climate change and ending scarcity, and then they race not to build AI tools, but to build replacements, to build machine gods. They resort to AI slop and porn and these things to pay the bills now until they get to this future. They invoke human flourishing to justify the superhuman risk. This is not optimism. This is negligence, dressed in optimism's clothing. True innovation in service of human flourishing requires something, unfortunately, that many in Silicon Valley simply lack: the humility to build carefully what you cannot easily unbuild. The wisdom to recognize that the same fire that warms can also consume. The founders understood this. They faced a version of our problem. They knew that power corrupts. They knew men are not angels. They knew concentration of authority, even wielded with the best intentions, always advances towards tyranny. Their solution was not to hope for virtuous rulers. It was to build a structure that would govern even when the men operating it were not virtuous. Architecture over aspiration, limits as a precondition of liberty, not as its enemy. And if current trends continue, I suggest we may need a constitutional settlement for artificial superintelligence. This means visibility. We track every nuclear warhead with obsessive precision. We know the serial number of every Soviet-era submarine. Yet a capability jump that could reshape human civilization might be announced in a Substack post. The federal government must have eyes on what's going on, not as like a regulatory overseer or a mechanism for government control of private companies, but as a sovereign, doing its constitutionally required duty to defend and provide for the common defense. It means sovereignty. Seal the breach through which American genius flows to authoritarian hands. No more selling the Chinese the rope for which they will hang us. No more cloud access loopholes. No more American AI research centers in Beijing and in Shanghai while these executives lecture us about winning the race with China. If competition matters, it's time to start acting like it does. It means deterrence. The infrastructure that will birth these systems, the data centers, the chip fabs, the power plants, these are military targets in the future. An adversary who would try to hold them at risk ought to know there will be severe consequences to any act of aggression. And we must build resilience against these attacks that move at machine speed. It means alignment as a national priority. If we cannot ensure that these systems pursue goals we intended, we have no business building them. The Manhattan Project had compartmentalization and oversight. The AGI project has circular financing and Substack posts. We spend more federal money subsidizing strip studies on treadmills than we do ensuring that superintelligence systems remain under human control. This is outrageous. And it means facing two comfortable truths that people may prefer not to speak about. First, if we will not stop selling China the means to match us, we may need a different kind of negotiation with Beijing. Recognition that we cannot build this type of AI safely in a race context, especially one with international stakes in the future, for the future of the international security architecture. Second, we must prepare for the possibility that AI development itself becomes a threat. Not a foreign government, not foreign development, our AI development here in the United States. If alignment fails and recursive self-improvement outruns our ability to control it, the question will not be whether we have the authority to act, it will be whether it's too late. So I want to suggest something larger. I think there's hope we can engineer a very bright AI-enabled future that increases prosperity, that improves security, and spreads liberty at home and abroad. But that future must be engineered, and by default, we are not on track to meet it. In the first instance, the questions before us are not actually policy questions. They're constitutional questions, they're civilizational questions. What structures preserve liberty when intelligence itself can be concentrated? What limits remain meaningful when one actor can outthink the rest of us? How does a free market function where the cost of labor falls to near zero? How do we build a framework for establishing flourishing in this age of machine intelligence? The founders did not answer their constitutional questions in a committee hearing. They did not delegate them to agencies. They gathered the wisest men they could find in Philadelphia in the heat of the summer, and they deliberated until they had an answer that satisfied them. I think we're on track to lead something like that again in the future. Not a regulatory process, not a bureaucratic commission that issues a report, a genuine national deliberation in the spirit of the Constitutional Convention that grapples with what it means to remain free people in the age of thinking machines. This builds a framework our children and grandchildren will inherit with gratitude rather than curse with despair. The founders gave us a government with enumerated powers so we could do things only the national government can do, provide for the common defense, secure the blessings of liberty. If superintelligence is not that thing, then nothing is. If this moment does not demand our highest wisdom and our hardest striving, then no moment ever will. Professor Piedra escaped Cuba with his 24-hour warning because he understood something that most Americans have never had to learn. You can lose your civilization quickly and permanently. And the people who lose it always think it can happen. Or, excuse me, the people who lose it never think it can happen. He joined what he thought was a democratic revolution, and within weeks it became something else. Castro didn't seize power because he had better arguments. He seized power because the institution that should have stopped him had already rotted from within. Piedra taught me that civilization is a choice, again, that we can make. We can make and affirm right now. That America stands as the heir and champion of a sacred tradition, a golden thread that runs from ancient Jerusalem to Athens, to Rome, to London, and finally to Philadelphia. Those ideas are worth preserving in this future. The framers also understood something that we may have forgotten, that lust for power is a permanent feature of human nature, and that its only defense against it is structure and checks and balances, separated powers and limits. A federal system where sovereignty is divided because concentrated power, especially with benevolent intentions, always corrupts. So we stand at an inflection point, and I say this not lightly. What we do in the next 1,000 days may echo through the centuries. The question is not whether we have the capability to lead. It's whether we have the will to do so well. Leading still matters. So I want to thank John Lanchowski, this institute. I owe you a great deal of debt for shaping me in my formative years, and not just student loan debt. I paid that off last year. And I'm really excited to thank you for letting me go on and on. I hope you got something out of this, and look forward to your discussion and your questions.
Really insightful talk. And my name is Joe Schneider, and I'm a visiting fellow at Pepperdine University Institute of Diplomacy, Strategy, and Innovation. And I'm working on a very similar topic in terms of grand strategy. Many of you ideas that we are working on. The basic organizational structure of humanity is the clan and the tribe. Since Westphalia, the nation state has been the political demonstration of that. So we are organized in nation states. The objective of all nation states, except for one, is to do the best for that race. You have the Chinese, they want to do the best for the Chinese. The French want to do the best for the French. That's their objective. America, as you mentioned, our objective is individual freedom. That is the core of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution that followed it. So our core values is individual freedom as opposed to what's best for, how do we increase stability and security and prosperity for our tribe primarily. So the question I have for you, and obviously the world is going to be very competitive along nation states if we have this balance of power world that people are talking about, and competition and all this stuff about nation states. Is there a way in AI to technically put as the core value of what comes out of AI that individual freedom will triumph? Because individual freedom under Pax Americana from 1945 to 1991 has produced the greatest evolution, positive evolution of humanity in the history of humanity. I can't say the same thing since 1991, but I can definitely say during the era of Pax Americana, driven by our core values. So is there a way to technically engineer that, as we develop AI and develop all these applications that you talk about, and others, that we can engineer, as your words, we can engineer that whatever comes out of that is driven by the core value of individual freedom?
Thank you, sir. It's really heartening to hear about your work and your very thoughtful question. This is the stated objective of all my friends in the labs right now, is to solve for this problem of translating those principles into a mechanism by which these machines can respond to. This is a field still of unsolved science, and really at the heart of the risk that Brendan and I have been thinking about a lot. And there are a bunch of different fields emerging to try to solve this. One field, to use a technical term, is called mechanistic interpretability, essentially AI reliability, and some agencies are starting to look at this, like DARPA. It turns out that same problem of translating your intent, your values into the AI system is blocking the military adoption of AI, because these AIs can't be trusted to maintain the commander's intent. It's the same underlying science. So money is being flowed to this issue from the private sector. I would argue there needs to be a lot more. And the federal government may have a role to play, but I think in a world in which this AI transition services individual liberty, that question will have to be solved in the first instance. Brendan has anything else?
Yes, I'll quickly say one of the things that does keep me up at night is as we sort of integrate AI into military applications, losing control of the decision making at the tactical level, but even more at a strategic level. And I really worry about, there are some people, at least that we've heard, privately at least, that are thinking about ceding some of that power, ceding the nuclear football even to AI. That is frightening. The other thing that keeps me up at night a little bit is talking about the nation state and kind of the Westphalian system. AI could potentially lead to a massive concentration of wealth and power in the hands of very few people, specifically the labs, and then depending on what the federal government does, with that. But it could lead to just a system where there is even more disproportionate influence from a very small group of people, whether you want to call that an oligarchy of sorts or not, whether it's a big tech oligarchy or sort of a combination of sort of big tech and government getting together and ruling in a way that we have never seen before. So those are a couple of things I know a lot of people are very concerned about. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so in terms, okay, thank you. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so in terms of you talked about your role in terms of legislation. So my question for you is, so what do you think about the president's executive order to have little regulation of AI itself in response to California enacting some regulation of it? And there's been proposed legislation in Congress on AI, but hasn't passed. So what would you think about that? And then in terms of what you said about what you think we need to do in terms of a larger conversation regarding data centers and supercomputers and all that. What do you think in terms of a constitutional basis should be done?
Yeah, I'll go quickly on the first part of the question. I bet generally people that care about this topic that come at it from our perspective, like a lot of what was in the AI action plan the president put out, a lot of those ideas were good. One of those ideas, though, was that we should not be sending our most powerful chips to China. Yet the policy of the government recently has been that we are allowing that to happen. That is an easy win for us as a country, is to deny China those chips. There's a bill that just passed today in the House Foreign Affairs Committee, led by Chairman Mast and Minority or Ranking Member Meeks, the AI Overwatch Act, and it has a lot of bipartisan support. That is a easy, good place to start, and hopefully the House of Representatives will pass that, and the Senate will take it up as well. I'll let Mark comment on that, or also the question you asked.
Yes, thanks. I was encouraged by the President's executive order because he did say that there needs to be a federal standard. Last year they tried to preempt states in Congress without replacing it with any standard. Not just California and New York, but Republican states like Utah and Texas and Georgia and other places. So I think it's important that if we're going to preempt the states, that we preempt it with something. On the broader question, like what do we, the most important thing we can do now is we want this prosperous future. We want innovation. We want all the benefits. We need to accelerate that. We just need to turn the headlights on. One of the most important things we need to do is get the government cited and asking the right questions. That means testing and evaluation of these systems in classified settings. Can Claude Opus 4.5 meaningfully contribute to a nuclear weapons program? Yes or no? Well, in order to answer that question, you need to be in the Department of Energy, you need to be in classified settings, you need to be prompting the models with restricted data, and you can start to understand, and you can build your own model. Is this stuff dangerous and on what timelines? None of this is for sure where this goes. This is all the future, and it's all highly uncertain. So one of the most important things we can do to prepare is to get this situational awareness way up instantly. And I think that's a relatively low cost bar to do. The other thing the federal government needs to do is more investment in alignment sciences via agencies such as DARPA, and letting the U.S. military and civilian research networks kind of go to town. Because right now the plan for this is we're going to build an AI, and the AI is going to tell us how to align itself, and it's going to be cool. We're like, well, not sure that's going to be the case either. So thank you for your question.
Last question.
Last question. Let's do the last question.
Hi, so I had a quick question. In multi-agent systems, how would you maintain auditability and human oversight with the current adaptation of M2M, so machine to machine, at really high speeds? Because are you seeing more of a constrainment or logging? Because I'm more worried about it being unauditable.
It's a great question. We have a software engineer in the room. I think what's really exciting about what we're going to see, I think we're going to see two things that are really interesting this year. First thing is AI doing novel science, and the second thing are these agents being dropped into corporations to do meaningful, real labor. And this is point of the gentleman uses the phrase multi-agent orchestration. So essentially different clones of the same model coordinating with each other. Now, when that's happening with 3 AIs copies or 10 AI copies, it's sort of still a little bit scrutable. You can kind of like, squint and sort of figure out what's going on. Where it starts to get interesting, and candidly, no one has really solved for this yet, is a world in which there are 1,000 of these things doing tasks and communicating in some cases in their own language or in ways that we just can't understand. And remember what these things actually are at the end of the day. They are gigantic, inscrutable arrays of fractional numbers. That's all they are. Data comes in, there's some magical thing that happens, and then an output comes out. We cannot break these things open to reason about them. So putting 1 million of them and having them coordinate with each other could, if steered properly in that first instance, could result in incredible economic value. If that system of however many of these agents is pointed in the wrong direction, though, then we might find ourselves in uncharted territory and incurring damages that we never kind of contemplated. It's a great question. Unsolved one.
I do also worry about these agents being released into corporations and then having their own privatized systems. And I know that those result queries will be sent back to the corporations that supply them. And I'd imagine it'd be on some kind of subscription-based service in these instances, but also with these corporations taking these different agents and the prices of NVIDIA chips going up and RAM as well. It'll also make it inaccessible to the average individual to build their own privatized AI system at home. And I'm kind of worried as that freedom disappears, it's going to be in the hands of just a few minute corporations.
That's a fabulous insight, and it touches on an issue what the industry calls open source. So you have private models that are controlled by a corporate firewall, you access via a website interface, you pay a subscription fee, versus you have these model weights, that array of fractional numbers out there on the internet you can download and use on your own. The challenge, as you point out, to build a frontier model right now I think we're at $10-ish billion for one training run. By the way, I don't remember exactly what an F-35 costs, but $10 million is some substantial number of F-35s for one AI system, to give you a sense of the economics of this scale. And simply, it's not going to be possible for, at least right now, for folks like you and me to like spin this stuff up in our basements. You know, you need gigawatts of power and so forth. Now, in the deep future, and these algorithms continue to improve. And by the way, when Beall was made, it cost $80 million. That same model today would cost $3 million. So the algorithmic improvements are making the efficient use of these computer chips way better. Costs are coming down. So there could be a scenario in which these things get really, really inexpensive to make, but that is sort of beyond, I think, where we're anywhere near that.
So I just want to thank everybody again for being here. I think we've exceeded our time. Thank you for your attention, and please stay in touch with us. We'll be happy to hang around for a bit, talk to you guys, and thanks again. Have a good night.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I want to thank you all for coming, and remind any of you who are interested in studying with us to be in touch with me or one of our staff. And I would like just to present each of you with a little token of our appreciation.